Season 6, episodes 10 and 11 of Star Trek The Next Generation are iconic. It's the one that has the that asshole captain.
I don't want to talk about it.
The one where Troy dresses like a grown-up.
I'd appreciate it if you wore a standard uniform when you're on duty.
And Riker acts like a bitch. But there's a lot more to it. I've always loved those episodes that are a bit unusual, and this has two elements that mix up the usual formula. Picard is not in command, and we have this new character who shakes up the dynamics. It's always interesting when that happens. And we have an episode dedicated to torture in a mainstream primetime show. Sure, it's not overly gory or violent, but it doesn't have to be. It still hits really hard. And it's not just gratuitous, repulsive schlock. So let's do the plot rundown thing, shall we? Now it kicks off at a rapid pace. This teaser is only 30 seconds long. Admiral Bichev is aboard the Enterprise and she explains that we have no time for pleasantries.
I'm afraid there's no time for the usual pleasantries.
As she informs Riker that there's going to be a change of command.
I'm here to relieve you of command of the Enterprise.
Wow, no kidding. It's all go, go, go. The Admiral dismisses Riker.
Thank you. That'll be all, Commander.
He seems nonplussed. I think it would have been funny if she kept on calling him back in again. It's just like, oh, just one more thing. Could you get me coffee and stuff like that? She doesn't do that anyway, because there's just no time to waste. So the situation is this.
The Cardassian forces, which were recently withdrawn from the Bajoran sector, had been redeployed along the Federation border.
In other words, the Cardassians have pulled their dicks out of Bajor and are waggling them around in the Federation's face near the something-something border. And that's raising tensions. Meanwhile, Picard, Dr. Crusher and Worf are pulling on their jammies and preparing for some Chuck Norris Delta Force shit. The Federation want their flagship to spearhead these negotiations, and the captain of the Cairo, Captain Jelico, is reassigned to the Enterprise and will be running things. He's experienced in dealing with the Cardassians, and Starfleet is trusting him to take a hard line with the Spoonheads. They're figuring they need a shot of bourbon here instead of a cup of Earl Grey tea. The stakes are laid out. The situation is on a knife edge. Every second counts. So Picard and Jelico adorn their formal attire and have a handing over ceremony at the bar, followed by a quasi-formal mixer with refreshments.
I'm afraid there's no time for the usual pleasantries.
There's more training for Picard and his team, and Jelico works to upgrade the Enterprise's technobabble.
Bypass between the main phaser array and the secondary generators. I also want to run the main deflector pathway to the warp power grid and the auxiliary conduit to the lateral relay.
Then they take the 52-hour trip to the point where the team will take a shuttle to charter a different ship to smuggle them to Sirtis 3. Then they can start their mission.
I'm afraid there's no time for the usual pleasantries.
After Team Triple Threat leave, there's tensions aboard the Big D. The crew don't feel like working very hard, but Jellico's making them. So Troy tries to talk to him like he's an infant, and he tells her to stop dressing like an 80s soccer mum at a cocktail party.
I'd appreciate it if you wore a standard uniform when you're on duty.
En route in the shuttle, Picard briefs his team, which is kind of handy because Worf really doesn't know what's going on.
Starfleet intelligence believes that the Cardassians are developing a metagenic weapon.
Oh my God.
I am not familiar with metagenics.
You're supposed to be a tactical officer. Why does Beverly know this and you don't? Whatever. Anyway, he fills in Worf in the audience.
Toxins are released into a planet's atmosphere. They immediately begin to mutate. They seek out and destroy all forms of DNA they encounter.
Wouldn't using such a weapon pose as great a risk to the attacker as to the target?
That's why metagenics and other biological weapons were outlawed years ago.
That's why they're outlawed? Not because they can wipe out an entire planet, but because they're as much a risk to the attacker? What kind of logic is that? Anyway, they don't know anything about this planet that they're going to. That's going to come up later.
What do we know about Sultrus 3?
Very little. It was thought to be uninhabited until these emissions were detected.
Once they arrive, the team secure a place on a ship by implying that they'll pimp Beverly out in a ride for a ride type of deal.
I would be very, yes, grateful.
Then they start doing their cave-wandering spec op stuff.
It's all right. They're called Linars. They're a kind of Celtran bat. They're harmless.
I thought we know
Very little.
about this planet, but you seem to know the specific name of this type of bat in this specific cave. Well, anyway, it's time to cut away from Guano Team 6 and check in on the negotiations. Jellico's playing hardball, using some power strategies and trying to keep the Cardassians on the back foot. It all seems to be going pretty well for Team Federation until, plot twist, the thingy weapon is a ruse. Beverly and Worf get away, Picard is captured, and we cliffhang into episode 2. Part 2 starts off with Patrick Stewart and David Warner doing some line readings and getting into character.
Name?
Picard, Jean-Luc.
Place of birth?
Navarre, France.
Bit weird, but okay. Then we get the gut punch in the negotiations as the Cardassians reveal they've captured Picard, and Riker does the stupidest thing you could possibly do in a situation like this.
You have Captain Picard. Is he alive?
Captain Picard is brought to his interrogator, and we get a nice directorial flair.
We have already sent a message to Tovan 3.
I know it's nothing too special, but I just kind of like those eyes adjusting to the light effect. It's a nice touch. Then Madred and Picard have a quite polite and interesting chat about Cardassian archaeology. Yeah, I forgot about that too. Kind of surprised. I thought they jumped straight into the literal gaslighting, but apparently not. After hanging around for a while, it's next day, and the torture really begins as Madred has a drink in front of Picard. Jean-Luc is offered a drink, but denied. But that's not the harsh part. It's the fact that Madred is using one of those really pretentious but utterly impractical cups that barely holds any liquid and which you can't actually set down because it's shaped like an ice cream cone, meaning that Picard would have to have a drink, but then have to pretend to still be drinking it long after it's empty because there's no obvious place to put it down, and no matter how fully you think you've drained it, some liquid will trickle out and it'll threaten to roll off the counter like it's possessed, even though you really placed it down as carefully as you could when you got fed up with pointlessly carrying it around. Madred is a cruel, diabolical bastard for this. After that act of barbaric sadism, it's not long before we get to the stuff that we all remember. Back on the Enterprise, Cardassian negotiator Lemec can see that he's got the upper hand. He shows that they have Picard, and he gives Jellico 7 hours to agree to their demands, which is a weirdly specific period of time, and it isn't the first time in this episode that something's going to take exactly 7 hours.
The transfer interface was not designed for that configuration. It will take 7 hours to make those changes.
Incident.
I'll have to discuss this with my superiors.
Of course. You have 7 hours.
It's not that things can't take 7 hours, it just seems a bit weird. Brimming with confidence, Lemec waves to Bob the security guy and swaggers out of the room. Riker insists on pushing for a rescue mission, which Jelico denies because it's a really, really stupid idea. I like Picard, but it's just a dumb idea. But Riker insists and is relieved of command after an intense shouting match. Jelico correctly deduces why the Cardassians wanted Picard, because he's actually working much better without Riker making a hash of things. Sorry, Riker fans, but that's kind of just how this all plays out. Back on Cetrus 3, it's bring your daughter to the torture day.
But human mothers and fathers don't love their children as we do.
So yeah, Madred is gaslighting his kid too. Jelico kind of wants to know where the Cardassians have been hiding, so orders a scan of Lemec's ship. He and the crew figure out that Cardassians have been hiding in the McAllister Nebula, and that made me think of those Black Mirror episodes with the USS Callister, but that's neither here nor there. A pretty exciting plan is hatched to send a shuttle in and mine the crap out of the area. There's a lot of shuttle stuff in this episode. It's almost negotiating time, and Starfleet is all out of leverage. Thing is, if this plan is going to work, Jellico's going to need an ace pilot to do this, and Riker is the best they have. So Jelico and Riker have a less than cozy chat.
I don't like you.
And Riker agrees to get it done. Back in Torturesville, Picard's resilience is starting to wear thin, but he gets the upper hand as Madred shows a glimmer of emotional vulnerability.
Must be rewarding to you to repay others for all those years of misery.
What do you mean?
Whenever I look at you now, I won't see a powerful Cardassian warrior. I will see a 6-year-old boy who is powerless to protect himself.
And Jelico lets the Cardassians know that he's done walking softly and is now wielding the big stick with an all-time badass line.
I'm not going to argue with you, Lemec. Every one of your ships has a mine on its belly, my finger's on the button, and you're in a very bad position.
Picard's release is a condition of not blowing up the Cardassians, so they pretty reasonably agree. And then we have that final showdown where we get that incredible moment. And Picard gets to go home. Jelico goes back to his previous command.
It's been an honor serving with you.
And it's been an honor serving with you. Oh, we're not doing that. Okay. All right. Picard's back on the ship, but he doesn't ask where his fish have gone or why Troy has stopped dressing like a high-class hooker. Instead, Patrick Stewart delivers exactly the right amount of pathos and vulnerability as he says,
I would have told him anything. Anything at all. But more than that, I believed that I could see 5 lights.
And the episode closes. So, the torture episode. I have some thoughts. First of all, this whole thing is even better than I remember. You learn lots about the Cardassians. The two main plots are distinct, but they work together to show different sides of a developing story. The right amount of time is spent on each.
7 hours.
Let it go, Gulnamek. They both have dramatic ups and downs, and you're never watching one part and wondering when you can get back to the next. You don't know how they're going to resolve. It's A-class stuff. It's kind of a game of two halves, so let's start with brutal, demeaning torture and the run-up to it. So, Picard, Crusher and Worf's run around in the dark. This is probably the weakest stuff in the episode. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad, though. The fact that it's all an elaborate ruse is an interesting twist, and it's refreshing to see characters like Picard and Crusher doing military shit. And you know, I guess this kind of Black Ops stuff does happen. It kind of messes with Starfleet's unfailingly upfront and honest facade. It's not exactly Section 31, but it is a glimpse at the shadier side of the Feds, literally and figuratively. Thankfully, the episode doesn't linger on this too much. You have just enough stuff to show that it's happening and sell the drama a bit. What is a shame, though, is that Worf's here. He's the most experienced tactical officer on the Enterprise. This kind of feels like something any grunt could do. All he really winds up doing is standing around while Crusher and Picard fight when they get ambushed. Then Worf beats up this Cardassian, who could have easily killed him. He holds a door open and gets phasered. Before that, he gets scared of some bats.
You're not afraid of bats, are you, Worf?
Only fools have no fear.
And he shoots a rock.
Assimilate this.
Well done, Mr. Worf.
It would have been interesting to see him react to Jellico's presence. Would Worf get protective of the crew and confrontational with Jelico? Or would he maybe be on board with Jellico's more direct, proactive approach? So the infiltration of Keltris 3 part of the storyline kind of has to be there. It is relevant to the plot, but what we're really interested in is part 2, Electric Torturoo. And when we get to these torture scenes, they are starkly distressing. They feel cruelly unsettling, and it's frankly surprising that we had this on a primetime family show. It's not like there's an abundance of gore or anything, but when it's done right, this ostensibly sanitized mix of psychological and physical torment makes this...
I don't enjoy this, but I must demonstrate. It will make everything clearer. Surprising, isn't it? Most people feel at first they can't steel themselves against it, but they're completely unprepared for the intensity of the pain. That was the lowest possible setting.
I know nothing about Minas Kova.
But I've told you that I believe you. I didn't ask you about Minos Kova. I asked how many lights you see.
So much more engaging than recent examples where they have gone overboard with that kind of stuff. Chain of Command is an acting masterclass. Reminds me of Harris Yulin and Naina Visitor's brilliance in Deep Space Nine's Duet. And David Warner didn't even know his lines. He was reading off a cue card because he was only cast just days before filming of Chain of Command began. On the subject of Gul Madred, he is a nasty piece of work. But the writing and Warner's performance do give him some depth. They add some nice details that make him much more than just some blank slate for Picard to be abused by. The performances, the character work. Honestly, you think you remember this?
5 lights. How many do you see now?
But there's so many fantastic, tense, smaller moments in the episode. And just to touch on that, The writing does a genius job of keeping Picard an active, invested character. He's helpless and tormented, but he still feels like he's in command by the end.
There are 4 lights.
Chain of Command is one of those episodes where both sides of the story are equally interesting. It's also of note that you've got 2 antagonists, Gul Madred of course, and then you've got, this ever so nasty new captain, Jelico. We remember him as being this braggadocious, blowhard taskmaster, right? What if we were a little bit wrong about that? What I mean is, Jelico is actually a pretty rounded character. I mean, you might well remember him yelling at Cardassians.
If the Cardassian Union truly wishes to discuss peace, they can send someone who can negotiate in a civilized manner.
Yelling at Riker.
Then maybe it's time you found other responsibilities.
Yelling at Cardassians. Again.
The big boys are sitting on your hull, just waiting for me to say the word.
But he's not anywhere near as one note as his legacy suggests. He's pretty demanding, but he makes his case.
If these negotiations fail, we can find ourselves in a war zone, and if that happens, I want to be loaded for bear.
And in the context of this episode, he does have a point. He's mean to Riker.
I don't want to talk about it. Get it done.
Yeah, but Riker kind of drops the ball here. And it's definitely not the first time that someone's called him out like this.
All you know how to do is play it safe. I suppose that's why someone like you sits in the shadow of a great man for as long as you have, passing up one command after another.
For everyone else, Jelico is kind of tightening the screws, but he's not some dictatorial, controlling a-hole. To prove it, I want to talk about my favourite scene in Chain of Command, one that no one ever seems to mention, even though it's very interesting. So at this point in the story, Jelico has been on the Enterprise for a while and he's been turning the screw and telling everybody to get it done.
Get it done.
Troy enters the ready room to try and get Jelico to ease off the gas a bit. I'm not sure if she's doing this of her own volition or the crew's asked her to do it. It doesn't really matter. I think Jelico clocks what's going on, and he's already showing a humane side by going over his kids' drawings. They suck.
It's an elephant.
But you know, he clearly loves what they've done. Now, the issue that Troy is talking to him about is that he's creating friction by being direct and demanding.
I'd like to talk about how the change in command is affecting the crew.
Kind of feels like Troy should be frank and honest here, but instead, Troy takes the tack of being really condescending.
Most of them had served under Captain Picard for several years. They knew him, and they knew what he expected.
And talking like an elementary school teacher, telling Jelico why he can't keep eating the other kids' crayons.
Now they're being asked to adjust to a new captain.
Now what Councillor Troy is saying is legitimate, it's a good point, but Jelico does something that's both a superb turnaround and a valid solution to the issue.
I'm glad you brought this to my attention, Deanna. You've clearly given this a lot of thought, so I'd like you to take charge of the morale situation.
That's fair. Entirely fair. I mean, really, isn't this her role on the ship anyway? And she sort of sidles out, tail between legs, before Jelico issues another authority solidifying directive.
I'd appreciate it if you wore a standard uniform when you're on duty.
Yeah, if you're going to wear pyjamas on the bridge, wear the same pyjamas that everybody else is. So what other observations are worth making about this episode? Well, there's this.
And get that fish out of the ready room.
And the aforementioned...
You're wearing sweatpants. It's Monday.
Of course, sir.
These were both requests from the actors. Patrick Stewart never liked the idea of animals for entertainment and had asked for the fish to be removed. Marina Sirtis kind of felt showing some cleave gave the writers license to dumb down Deanna and made her feel like less of a member of the crew, which is kind of a fair point. Troy did get some more dynamic storylines after this and looks much more grown up in a proper Starfleet uniform. It's really interesting that we have this immensely divisive character serving as a cipher for granting two long-standing, very personal wishes of the cast. In Chain of Command, we also have one of the darkest and most distressing episodes that spawned some of the most prolific and parodied memes of the franchise. We have Riker being shown up by an ambitious and talented officer, again. We have a storyline all about negotiating, which is resolved with a military solution, which is a bit odd. It's earned, and Jelico doesn't go full ED-209 on the Cardassians, but still. And we have an episode stuffed with member berries that's actually better than you remember, and memorable for more reasons than you realise.